In today's rant that will not change anything in the world, but I don't know, want to talk about, video games are getting more expensive. No, this is not just one video game, it's not just one video game series, this is kind of an across-the-board thing. And I wanted to talk about this for a few minutes, kind of get your thoughts on it. I think most people kind of fall under, I don't want to pay more than I have to for anything, especially because a lot of people don't have tons of disposable income, but this is something that is going to be industry-wide very soon. Nintendo announced a little bit back with the Nintendo Switch 2 announcements that they were going for a variable pricing strategy, and that meant that some games were going to be more expensive than other games. You know, some might be $80, some might be $50 or $60. Basically, it's going to be based on what they value the game at. But it's not just Nintendo. This is also a problem with Microsoft and Xbox, because just the other day, they basically released a whole press statement talking about how the Xbox Series X was going to go up by 100 USD, and about how games were going to go up by about 10 United States dollars, essentially from 70 to 80. Now, I know in a lot of countries, there's different rates of pay for video games. For some countries, and I know that people in America are just now learning what tariffs are, but in some countries, there have actually always been tariffs on different products, and that's always been passed on to the consumer. It's never paid by a company. I can't tell you why. I mean, other than just corporate greed, that's just kind of how it is. So in some countries, this has always been a thing. But before someone gets mad and says, now hold on, the tariff situation is being worked out, we're going to get into that too. That's not what I really think all of this is about. Some people are going to think that's what it's about no matter what. But this is a problem that's even been affecting retro games in a different way. It's been affecting a lot. And people say vote with your wallets, but I don't really think anybody does. So we're going to talk about that today for a few minutes. I'm going to be interested to hear your thoughts down below. When money comes up, people get very passionate. When any kind of intersection with politics or economics comes up, people get passionate. So what do you think about this whole thing? Do you think that price raises are justified on anything? I have heard people say, well, hour for hour, it's a better value. Like, you'll go to the movies for $40. Why won't you pay $100 for a game? All this stuff. I've heard all of it before. So if you have that opinion, I'm interested in an actual justification for it. Because, like, for me, I would even argue that a lot of the things people are willing to pay money for aren't worth it to me. But that's me. Now, when it comes down to it, I think it's worth noting that for me, I'm not angry about this. I'm not angry about Nintendo Switch prices going up for their games. I'm not angry about Microsoft prices going up for their games. Maybe I should be, but as someone who just has a ton of video games, like I said in my GTA video, I kind of look at this and I just think this is just going to push me away from buying new games. Like, what this is going to do, and this is why digital is such a big push too, because they don't want a secondhand market. They don't want people like me who can wait and buy a game for half price in 6 months. They don't want that. I truly believe that's why companies are pushing to move more towards all digital, where they can control the price at any time. But what this is doing for someone like me is I have a gaming PC. Obviously, emulation is a thing on there, but also just buying games dirt cheap on Steam 6 months to a year later is a thing on there. I also have tons of retro consoles, and I kind of just look for deals on the games I want. Now, the unfortunate thing about this is I think things are being blamed for this price increase across the board that aren't necessarily responsible for it. If it is the tariffs, because they say responding to market conditions and stuff like that with Microsoft, well, then they'll immediately lower prices if that situation is resolved, right? I mean, I do follow political news. I don't go ad nauseum on about it to you guys because I figure you're inundated with it all the time. Somebody is always talking about one of the many tragedies, genocides, awful wars being run in the world. Will I bring that stuff up sometimes on like my Let's Play channel and stuff where it's just podcast style, we're just talking? Sure. But like on a channel like this where I'm talking about other things, I try to not go too hard on that because it's like you're hit with that every second of the day all the time. But if the news is true and there is actually talks about these tariffs in the United States and stuff like that, that are underway and things could change, well then all of these market decisions would be reversed, right? I mean, prices would go back down and it wouldn't just be passed off to the consumer. Or if these companies were actually sorry for increasing prices or actually felt bad for you for increasing prices, they would eat the cost. They don't care. That's not what the point is. They don't feel bad about raising the prices. Companies across the board have been looking for excuses to raise prices for decades. I would argue forever, but especially in the last couple decades. And you can see it in any kind of consumption. If you look at food, you look at things like peanut butter jars, just an example, or mayonnaise, or ketchup. And I go to condiments because it's just a very easy one. Especially in the United States, if you look at what they've done to them, they have done things like redesign the bottles to cork upward in the middle, like to slant upward on the very bottom in the middle, to put less of the condiment in there, right? But the prices never went down when they did that. It was an example of giving you less, but charging you the same or raising the price. Now, some industries have a harder time doing that because it's more obvious. Like with video games, if you cut down content, it's much more obvious. It's a lot less subtle to then charge more. So what did companies do? Well, they started doing microtransactions, which I'm not even against the full existence of. I know I just triggered some people, but like if your game is free, you know, like I talk about Fortnite all the time. I show my Fortnite code left and right. Here it is right now. It's something that helps my channel a ton every month because YouTube doesn't push my channel at all. You know, like, so when I see a game like that, one, I obviously have a vested interest in it because it does help me, but two, it's a free game. You know, so it's like if somebody wants to buy a costume or something in that, hey, whatever, it's a free game. Same thing with something like Marvel Rivals. Now, can I have issue with some of the pricing values on these things? Yeah, sure, and I say that sometimes. Like, I don't think a skin for a character in a free game should be $20. I just don't think it should be. But if somebody wants to spend that $20 on that game that is just already free, whatever. But the thing is, now we have full price video games that have incorporated hundreds of dollars of microtransactions into them. Call of Duty and Assassin's Creed are two right there. Pretty much every EA game under the sun, they've tried to push microtransactions in. So that was I guess I should say an example of them trying to give you less and charge more. But, you know, even going way back, we had DLC. And some games, it was always additional content. Like it really was, hey, let's see if the game does good. It's probably going to do good, so we'll plan like one DLC, but if, you know, it's doing really good, then we'll keep going after that. But for a lot of games, you know, nowadays, and I know this unfortunately from some people I've known who work in the games industry, especially in bigger companies, there are plans like, let's move this content that could be included at base into something later to charge for it, or into something later to have a roadmap so that we can look like we're giving more. That's a real strategy that is done by a lot of huge companies. It sucks, but it's an example of giving you less while charging you the same or charging you more, right? And I have no problem, again, like there are subtleties to this. I have no problem with DLC if it adds substantive, I should say, I think that's how it's pronounced, value, like it adds something of worth to the game. I think back to Skyrim. It's always a great example for me. And I think of something like the Dragonborn DLC, where you're adding, I mean, possibly dozens of hours of gameplay, new weapons, items, all this stuff, right? That's something where I'm like, okay, yeah, DLC, I'm fine with this. It's adding on to a game substantially. But the problem is that you also have all of these different patterns where development teams, or I should say the producers above them and executives above them, want them to shift things out of the possible initial release and move it away from that. So right there, you know, there's subtlety to it. Are there examples of DLC that are good? Yeah, I think there are, and I think that's okay. And I'm actually not a purist in the sense where I believe it can't exist. You know, do I prefer the days where the whole game was there on disc? Yeah, but I'm also okay with the days where the game was complete on disc and you could get additional content that added to it, not additional content that was stripped out. I'm okay with that. But for me, that's kind of where it ends. Those things, and then free games doing microtransactions. My problem is that more and more companies moved to take advantage of these systems to give you less and charge you the same or more. And that's truly what I think we're seeing with Xbox and Nintendo and a lot of different companies now is, how do we charge you more while blaming an external factor? Like, they've been looking for a scapegoat to raise game prices forever. And, you know, in some ways, honestly, rightfully so. Like, the idea that games cost more money to make, so we need more money for them to be profitable, I understand that. However, I would also argue that budgets have gotten out of control, just like they have for movies. They've gotten insane, and very few games should have the kind of budgets that require an insane price to justify their budget. That shouldn't be a commonality. And you also have this problem too. So I guess my point with that is, I don't really buy the whole tariffs thing. I do believe that there is obviously an impact. Like, I'm not stupid. I understand how economics work. There is an impact, and these things are used as a leveraging tool for economic negotiations, which unfortunately, in the meantime, when they're used as that, sometimes they either end up permanent with some countries, other times they end up hurting a consumer for a while, sometimes they're just a bluff. But I don't believe that that's the cause of what this is. I truly believe the games industry has looked to do this for a long time. And on top of that, it's not even something you can escape into retro games with. You know, when I was a kid, old video games were considered obsolete. There were very few old video games that were worth a ton of money. Yeah, they existed. There were some rarities, you know, like, oh, there were only so many copies of this made, or maybe it was from Japan and it did get a official dub in English. It got in a translation, but it was niche. You know, they didn't think they'd sell very many, so they didn't make many. Things like that. It makes sense. But as I've gotten older, I've noticed more and more people don't want to work. And that does play into this. A lot of people want to be like a modern day treasure hunter. What they want to do is they want to go out of their way to find a game that has some value and do whatever they can to increase the value or increase the scarcity or drive up that market value and put people who actually did want to enjoy that piece of art in a pinch where that's the only option they have. And I've listened to countless stories from eBay sellers, all these people, of like when they do sell something for less, even sometimes being contacted by other people, especially in the retro games market. And I remember Pat the NES Punk talked about this back in the day, I believe, on one of his podcasts, who's a kind of like an OG YouTuber. A lot of people have talked about this, where there are stories, I believe it was him, if it wasn't, I apologize, but where there are stories where someone will be selling a game that's somewhat rare or not super common, and they'll be selling it for less than what other video game resellers think it should be, and someone will reach out to them, or multiple people will reach out to them on eBay and borderline harass them in DMs to raise the prices because they're quote-unquote ruining it for other resellers. So I think a lot of people too, what they want to do is purposely drive up these prices even on retro, because a lot of people like me go back to retro games because there was an era where games were mostly complete and where they were, I don't know, like you felt like you were getting more of a value. And you can't even escape to that anymore, it feels like, because people are trying to price gouge everything under the sun, even things that were mass produced. I always mention Pokemon Emerald. It's like a constant annoyance to me, because a game like that, mass produced on the Game Boy Advance, not rare by any means, and people try to sell, you know, it for an arm and a leg. There's no reason it should be the value it is, but a bunch of resellers got together and decided to price gouge it, so it just sells for that. And that's what it is. It's unfortunate because I think that gaming was actually, believe it or not, one of the cheaper hobbies you could have. You know, it was one of the hobbies where you could replay something over and over again. Your console used to last for decades, possibly, and I feel like they last less and less long now. The games were complete on disc, or they were complete and then they had additional content, and now many of them feel incomplete. Not all, but many do. And it's something where it feels like peanut butter. It feels like the jar is constantly being carved upwards from the bottom, but they're trying to make it look like from the outside that it's the same amount, the same value, or maybe even better, and you're underpaying for it. And I just kind of find it sad. You know, I think this is a problem that's going to affect pretty much everything. And I don't want to do like a video game scare here, because at the end of the day, these are not necessities. they're fun, they're pieces of art, they're interactive, and they do matter. I care about them. But this is actually why I've been collecting video games for years. This is why I've been collecting physical games for years. Because when it comes to a time where maybe nothing is complete anymore at launch, or when it comes to a time where every game is $90 or $100 in the future or things like that, and it's just not worth it to me, I will have the entertainment that I want to have. Does it suck that new stuff is going to be an arm and a leg? Or that, you know, I'm going to be priced out of it or pushed away from the hobby? Yeah, it sucks. I mean, this stuff always sucks. But it's why I've been pushing for years that it was important to know that you own your media, to be able to, I don't want to say hoard, but store up the things that you care about for yourself or for your family or for whoever, your friends circle, whatever you want, because these companies are not getting any more generous. And I truly believe they've all been looking for excuses forever, and especially these people who price gouge games on their own accord, they don't even need an excuse. So this hobby is unfortunately going away that I don't think many people are happy with, and I just think it's a shame. I want to hear your opinion down below. People always say speak with your wallets, but I very rarely see that happen with video games. It happens sometimes, but for the most part, it seems like people just buy everything and don't care, which is, I don't know, it's sad because it tells these companies they can do whatever they want, and basically to them it tells them we're all too stupid to care. It doesn't tell them that we don't care. It basically just reaffirms to them that we're a bunch of idiots. So interested to hear your take. If you enjoyed this video, you want to leave a like, subscribe, I appreciate you very much. Thank you for checking out this channel and this video. If you want to support this channel, we do have channel memberships. We do also have our own Patreon. There are exclusive pieces of content on both of those. And we have our own store, cosmobunny.shop, where we sell coasters, keychains, trays, and more from recycled comic book, manga, and magazine paper that was damaged. We take books that were damaged and we transform that art into something new through a new medium. And also, as well, we have our sale going on, which is code SALE in all caps, but there is actually a link in the comments and description down below that will take you right to that store, and if you use that link, anything you add to your cart will actually have the sale auto applied to it, which is 15% off your entire purchase. So we hope you have a fantastic day, and as always everyone, stay shui.